Good evening, everyone. So tonight, thank you for joining us. And firstly, I would like to introduce you to the two people that I'll be holding a discussion with tonight. And that's Amy Knoles, who's a electronic musician and percussionist who works at CalArts, and she's had a career spanning over 3 decades. And she's worked with a lot of notable figures such as John Cage and Stockhausen and Boulez and Morton Subotnick. So she's got a pretty impressive portfolio, to say the very least. And on the other side, we have Mark Day, who's a side chance producer and composer, and who I consider to be a pioneer in the field because he's taking musical possibilities within the genre to new limits with what he's doing. And tonight, well, also it's interesting because they both come from very different backgrounds, Amy having a formal education and Mark being largely self-taught. But what's interesting is when it comes to the topic of tonight, they both share a very strong common ground. And we had an informal meeting the other night where we were discussing the subject, and everything flowed very harmoniously. It was completely effortless, like from both sides, how they were able to share their ideas and views on the subject. And that subject, namely, is how technology is a conduit and catalyst for the evolution of human consciousness from perception of music. And to provide a brief backdrop of what I'm trying to talk about, when we think about technological evolution, we can see that there's also been an evolution in our living standards and in the way that we can interpret the world and reality and the way that we can connect with each other. And this has happened exponentially, and this has happened in every field and walk in life, from food production to information systems, and obviously with the arts. And in the 20th century in music, more possibilities opened up than the rest of history combined, largely through the advent of technology. And through technology, new sounds were able to be created. We were able to understand new ideas concerning harmony and structure, and basically opened up a whole world that made something that seemed, potentially finite seem completely limitless. The thing is that whereas when you're thinking about other art forms, they've moved along with the evolution, evolution, like when we're thinking of visual art forms. So obviously with painting, we think that the role of painter throughout history was to try and emulate reality as accurately as possible. And then by the time that the camera was invented and we were able to take photographs, that had reached the point of capturing real life as much as we could. And then obviously with photography, we got higher and higher resolutions to the point of high definition, where we're now able to see things with more clarity than ever. That's far more realistic than Technicolor of the 20th century. And then we think also about forms like theatre or cinema. So they're trying to replicate human beings behaving as human beings in a sense. And the more realistic things got with cinema, we can also see in recent times with television's golden age, which we're kind of going through right now, or at least we're going through very, very recently, when we were able to take things of cinematic proportions but make them go over longer time spans, and becoming more and more resolute with how we're understanding and perceiving reality. But when it comes to music, this hasn't necessarily been the case, because music's abstract and it's quite ambiguous. And whereas with other art forms, like I said, we can kind of explain things, which is why, say with art, for instance, even with abstract stuff, we can still relate to it on some level. With music, there has been a lot of misconception due to the evolution of harmony of the 20th century. And that meant by the end of the Second World War, classical music sort of went to 2 extremes, with a lot of stuff in the middle. And one extreme you had popular music, and on the other you had the avant-garde of the 20th century. And the thing is that that sort of brought about the notions of popular and serious music. And obviously you need both, but because popular music's a lot more, instantaneously relevant and easy to get into, it means that the more experimental side of things is, either alienated audiences or made things very niche. And with that, a lot of kernels of wisdom have been lost. And that's largely due to the pop music industry and culture. And, through technological evolution, rather than actually using technological potential to, inaugurate possibilities, it's meant that people have relied on, preconceived formulas like loops and sort of patterns and, certain recording techniques that, which make a lot of modern day pop music sound very similar. And that, that's meant in a sense that whereas we might be visually more enhanced than we may have been in the past in some ways, where, in terms of listening, many of us are like regressing because of the fact that we're listening to music that's far less sophisticated and far less natural than music of, even, relatively recently. And this also brings into the question of technology about the bad habits that have been accrued through using technology. And in my lifetime, technology's evolved faster than human beings have, which has meant that we've acquired a lot of bad habits, such as being on this all the time and, needing instantaneous gratification. And that's meant that we're seeing some, we've had to deal with some challenges, then we're still seeing these challenges ahead. And so that brings about the reality of the fact that we have this thing called technology. We can't get rid of it because it's evolved with us. It's completely natural in a sense. But it seems like with all the current challenges and the current chaos going on, the only way that we're going to be able to live harmoniously alongside technology is if we evolve, collectively speaking, but as within ourselves. And that also brings into account how music affects the mind. And with research that's been done on music psychology, there's been a lot of discoveries in the 20th century that have shown how harmony affects us in a certain way, and how music and emotion are related, and how classical music affects long-term memory and cognition in a very positive way, because it's because of geometric patterns and whatever. But there hasn't really been as much understanding of how music since the advent of technology has really affected us in the same way, because of the fact that it made everything infinitely more complex and ambiguous, in the sense that, say, pitch and timbre become obfuscated, and rhythm as well, and the fact that perceptually it's not really the same as something that would be more directly relatable, say like Mozart or whatever. And so it's meant that we're sort of in this quandary now where we've got a lot of untapped potential beneath us, with music and sorry, I'm just losing my train of thought here because there's just too much to talk about. It's just taking on quite a lot from the other day.
Great, Jason.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But yeah, no, but basically, you can see there's all these interconnected points, and so there's a lot of untapped potential where, with music, and at the same time, it seems like we're only barely scratching the surface. And at a time when we're needing new possibilities, and we can see that sound and music obviously affects us in very profound ways, we should also be thinking about this on more innovative levels that can ultimately affect us in, pretty transcendental ways. So I think, without further ado, I'm going to let you guys talk for now. Now that I think I've provided a brief backdrop of what we're more or less trying to convey through this talk. So why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Do you want to go first, Amy, or?
Go for it, Mark.
Okay. So I'll start probably back in time, say from the 50s and 60s, where obviously computer chips became more cheaper over time, and the technology increased since then, really. So you're looking back in the 60s, everyone just had a basic guitar, basic drums. It wasn't it wasn't the electronic stuff. It was more acoustic. Get into the electronic side. So as technology increased, since the synthesizers came in the 70s, Then you had the modular stuff back then. You know, the genres have increased since then. So you've had this massive explosion of musicality and, you know, culture and everything around it. So it's increased over time, which is amazing, you know. So we've got more genres have emerged. We've got, you know, as time's gone on, it's been increased more and more. So in the 90s, you know, dance music came along, electronic music with the 4x4 kick, and that kicked off a whole scene, a whole, you know, genre. Since then, it's just evolved since then. And then nowadays, you've got streaming services, you've got headphones, you can listen to music on, you know, back in the like MP3 players. But it's just been an explosion in every direction possible. You know, but people have more access to music. The technology has increased as well. So it's just exploded out. So, I mean, for humanity, it's been, very good. You know, now you've got brain implants you can get when you can connect your mind to a computer. And I think that they are working on technology now where it can come out with a melody from that. They can design sound from this. And they've also got AI also making the melodies. So it's just increasing from there. It's just it's literally like a circle. It's exploding out in every direction as far as I can see.
Yeah. But I mean, like, one of the problems with that, though, is that, like, it doesn't seem to be known to, like, you know, a huge number of people. Because it's only the people that are working exclusively with technology. But also at the same time, a lot of people do tend to rely on what's already there rather than exploring for new things. And I remember you touched on it before.
However, there is a great, Yoko Ono keeps taking it down, but David Rosenboom, who was our dean at CalArts, many years ago, was into brainwave synthesis, and he was actually on the Merv Griffin show with Yoko Ono and John Lennon, curated by Chuck Berry, who was way into this sort of thing, apparently. It must have been the 70s, because they were all wearing turquoise psychedelic bell-bottom, you know, pants and shirts and things. But so way back when, they were looking at, with an analog synthesizer, making music from brain waves on, you know, television.
Wow.
Back, you know, so it was there. It kind of dipped, and now it's back with the latest technology where you can go anywhere and dive into the ocean and come out with this, you know, this headgear on, or you can make music with it. So
what was the output of those? Was it just general tones?
Say it again.
Was it like complex sounds? Was it general tones coming out of the brain waves, or was it complex sounds, or was it just like waves? Or?
It was triggering analog sounds, so somewhat complex, somewhat not complex. And he's actually doing it now because there's new technology available, where you know, it can translate into just about anything once you filter the data, you know, in the way that you might want, you know, so you can skew it obviously into melodies or whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, you can see how AI is increasing it as well. How they can write simple melodies now, and then they're trying to have them compose classical pieces as well. So I mean, you can see how it is slowly increasing. It's probably maybe about 10-20 years until the singularity. So apparently, so I guess until then, it's going to be like an upwards exponential curve of just increasing musicality, and everything's going to be like. It should be quite fun.
And they do the same thing with recording sounds from plants as well now. So they take sensors and take the sounds of plants and transmit that into music form. But that touches the soul.
Yeah. From nature, direct.
Oh, that's very interactive. I didn't realise we're getting audience to talk already. Hello.
I'm unmuting myself again.
Now you know where I get it from. Anyway, it's interesting you mentioned the singularity, because corresponding to artificial intelligence, this also brings about the question of intuition, because of one thing that you can't quantify and that I don't think a machine would be able to ever grasp is the notion of what intuition is. We don't really know what it is. It's just when we get an idea or an impulse to do something, and that isn't necessarily something that can be measured or weighed or whatever. And then obviously any sort of act that we do is fundamentally intuitive. It's, you know, even if there's robotic elements, it's still fundamentally intuitive. And when we're making music, for instance, especially when we're making music from what's inside us, it is really an intuitive thing. And therefore, that also brings into the question, you know, concerning consciousness and evolution, like how would, I mean, we're looking at artificial intelligence. I mean, I'm looking at like people's habits and like regressing to, you know, to sort of like degenerative behavior through technological consumption. I mean, in the sense of music, by using just not exploring new sounds, but using like the pads that are already there, for instance. I mean, like how do we confront that obstacle? For instance, as musicians, how do we confront that?
Well, I think basically our mission is to continue to create new forms constantly, right? To be growing and growing, and we all bring our past to our futures, and for me, it's been going through that whole tradition of working with composers, you know, interpreting their music, and with the ear unit, the group I had for about 30 years, we would commission or perform pieces by anyone. You know, we weren't that sort of uptown or downtown sensibility. We'd always do one theatrical music theater concert, generally very absurd, once a year out of our series of 4. So there was no, you know, single genre that we'd stick to. You know, so for me, I come out of just this entire jumble of musical techniques and things, alongside with always being, you know, a drummer and touring with rock band, you know. So for me, I take forms that I've learned and try to apply those structures to what I do. And so like a piece I wrote called 9875431 is from this sort of totalist tradition. Was a response to minimalist music that has those simple melodies, but are juxtaposed by very complex rhythmic structures that are easy to make happen. So if you take a really huge 9 and then you put an 8 against it, and then a 7 and a 5 and a 4, they'll start to evolve organically and work against each other and finally become a giant groove. So there's that kind of intellectual impetus in the beginning, but the way that I would do it is to perform, to bring in each of those things live. And it would always be different. And there's millions of ways to make it happen. Could I play a quick excerpt?
Please, yeah.
Just to, let's see if I can get this happening. 987. Very edited.
So that was a 987-543.
Do what?
So could you explain a bit about that? Like, I mean, again, just to recap, it was what, like 9 against 8 against 7 against 5 against 4 against 3. Is that what was happening?
I live loop a 9, 1, 2.
Yeah.
Keeping the audience just like very uncomfortable because nothing's happening for 9 bars.
Yeah.
Then the 8 comes and the 9 comes, and then 7. So I get boom, 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 and I'll put a 5 against it. Then I'll put there's always a common pulse, and then and they just create this mesh of a groove. And it's an hour-long piece, so that's just a really quick transition into a middle section, which is what I feel like playing at the moment texturally. Bringing the guitars back in a short 9, 1, 2, in the harmonic series against an 8, 7, against a 5, until it all kind of, you know, turns into this insane cacophony. But it's that, you know, that kind of sense of groove to me, you know, which, you know, the common pulse and the, you know, it's all rock and roll to me. It's just like
yeah, interesting. Oh, sorry, you're gonna say something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, good. I mean, yeah, it's just based upon rhythms. What kind of sounds are you using for that? Like, how do you generate?
I was using there's these this sound pack called Damage, where is a Contact sound pack came out a couple of years ago, where these percussionists and audio engineers on the East Coast recorded, you know, hitting dumpsters with sledgehammers, breaking the windows of buses in, you know, dropping giant metal things and recording them impeccably, which is something I, you know, could never do on my own. So they have this really nice impact, you know, and then again, you know, using Ableton as the DAW for it, sort of the glue that binds it together, and then, you know, more native instrument stuff, and yeah.
Amazing.
I love it all. Yeah.
It's like similar to Psytrance, I guess, how you build it, because we also use heavy oscillator packs and Damage and all the different ones that they do. I think with Psytrance is kind of, we have the 4x4 structure. So it's kind of like a dance music track, but inside there's not really many rules. So you can play around with, you know, however you like to play. Whatever sounds you want to put in, you can put in. So some people go for more dance floor stuff, like more simple structure. Other people go for, like, you know, crazy melodies. Some people go very fast. It's just how you build the track, and, you know, there's not really any rules of it, which, you know, is quite handy. Any sound you want to put in, you can. There are like some sounds that everybody uses, but I mean, you're quite free to experiment quite a bit. Yeah, usually when I build a track, usually put the kick and bass, which is the bass is usually a 3-note, 16-note bass line. So it's and then from there you can build on top of it. So you start with maybe some hi-hats, some snares, some drums, percussion. Then you start putting atmospheres in, little weird sounds here and there, trying to create some sort of like a rhythm. But like you have many different rhythms going on at the same time. So you'd have the kick and bass rhythm. Obviously, you've got the hi-hat rhythm. You've got like the percussion, whatever you're going to do there. And then afterwards, you put the sounds on top. So they're on a different rhythm as well. So it's like it's kind of like a fugue, I guess you could say, which sometimes meets up, and then sometimes just goes crazy. Sometimes you have crazy melodies, and yeah, I mean it's quite experimental music, but yeah, it's quite freeform. And it's at the cutting edge of technology, I would say as well. Because psytrance wasn't really around until the 90s. It started off with Goa trance, and before that, I guess acid house. So as drum machines and as this technology became a bit more like cheaper for people to buy, then the whole scene erupted from that. So you started having Goa trance parties, and they did some all around the world, and then it slowly evolved into psytrance, like full-on psytrance is more the dance floor stuff I was saying about before, and then it goes into like more dark side, more experimental territory, which is a bit more innovative, I guess you could say. Comes out, you have new ideas and new sounds are being used inside. Like I said, I mean, you can pretty much put any sound you want, which is quite good, especially in this dark side category. People call it dark side, although it's not really dark. It's just more interesting sounds going on. I can play a little bit as well, just to show. There it is. This is from, did you guys hear that? This is one of my songs. As you can see, there's lots of melodies, different weird effects going on at the same time, but it's still keeping that 4x4 beat. You're supposed to follow the 32 structure, but you don't really have to. You can pretty much do whatever you want.
Volume seems a little bit weird. Was that meant to be like that? I don't think it's volume. Hello.
Can you hear it?
I can now. Yeah. No, I can't now. Hang on.
Are you using the same output from?
Can you guys hear that?
It was going loud, going quiet, going loud, going quiet, like constantly. Like sort of like that.
Okay. Yeah, you get the idea, I guess. Anyway, like how it's all...
for Chrome for that to play
Say
that
again?
as your output for your
Google Chrome.
Yeah.
this. Yeah, I've run into that before.
Yeah, fair. I can probably try and arrange it, but I mean, maybe if you heard it a little bit, you kind of get the idea how it's kind of just, it's crazy sound. You can do anything you want inside, you know, as long as you've got the kick and bass going, and yeah, you can just pretty much experiment how you want. The thing I guess would characterize psytrance a lot, would separate it from the other genres, is the fact that, you know, we use so many plugins, so many effect plugins on the sounds that we do, that it really is ingrained with technology. It does go hand in hand. You know, new synthesizers come out all the time, like new soft synths, at least VSTs, and you know, all the psytrance producers are usually using the latest ones. So it is very cutting edge in terms of technology wise. You know, I was going to touch on as well, actually, because we have so much technology to use and so many plugins that we can use. Sometimes we can get a bit lazy with it. So we can have like all these effects plugins for our sounds. So rather than making the sound ourselves, like how we want it to sound, you know, in a certain way. People just throw effects plugins on it, on the sound, which changes it, which is good. But the problem is, you get lazy with it. You know, you can just go to the presets and not actually design it how you want. You don't really learn how the actual thing or the tools work. So everyone kind of can sound the same after a while, which is can be a problem. You know, inside trance.
Yeah.
Yeah, can be positive. There's many good producers out
there. There have been people, you know, in the past when we were all using hardware, you know, I wanted to sell an effect box, and somebody bought it because it had that one effect that they really wanted, and you really could make that, you know, with another effects box if you understood how it was made, you know. And that all of these things have amplitude envelopes, filters, you know, oscillators going through them, the same basic fundamentals, you know. So it's so much fun to play with new plugins, and you get so many ideas, you know. But being able to kind of you know, if every once in a while you force yourself to try and recreate that sound on a, you know, in Reactor or in, you know, Operator in Ableton or something, you know, try and recreate a sound. It just sort of opens up the world for you, you know, to really get in and try and make the most out of, you know, one thing. But, you know, I'm obviously a victim, you know, not a victim, but a perpetrator of the opposite. Because I just love, you know, something new comes out and I'm just, I gotta have that, you know. I really want to play with that. And just one quick thing, that because most of my pedagogy is teaching controllers and things, and not one of them has everything you want. They all have something really amazing that they can do, but not one of them, you know, can actually cover it, you know, can cover it completely. So I'm kind of deciding, well, am I going to tour with this, you know, giant electric xylophone this time, or am I going to tour with you know, this sort of portable drum set with sensors on it? You have to make a choice between what you're going to put out there musically based on how much you can physically, you know, carry around with you. When the presenter picks you up off the train in Holland on a bicycle, you know, and you've got 50 pounds back in this giant road case, this other giant road case, you're like, no. So, yep. Oh, technology.
We're quite lucky to be alive at this time, I guess, with all the stuff that's available. You know, like I said, it's becoming more and more all the time. It's just like taking off in many directions. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see where it actually go to. I guess it would be maybe the neural link to just be plugged into your head and just directly, you know, whatever you're thinking into some music, which would be, yeah, it'd be quite interesting, I guess, what could happen.
We have to make Jason, you, I, Boo Boo, everybody that's making music, you know, can actually steer it.
I mean, sorry, were you going to say something? I didn't want to interrupt. Were you going to? No?
Just bring.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like, just one thing I was gathering from what you guys were talking about just now, is that, like, obviously with technology, like, it is partly innovation and intuition, which you both clearly, you know, which you both made very clear. But at the same time, there's also like the you know, the sort of prefixes that are always there, and that's just something that's quite natural, and it's always been the case without technology. When you're thinking about different music styles that were used in the past, for instance, or the limitations of instruments, that's always been something that's been generally quite there. But thinking about electronic music, obviously in the past, you know, starting from the end of the Second World War, it would have taken significantly longer to have done something very basic that now would take a matter of seconds. So like early electronic studies would have taken months and months to produce maybe like a minute of music, whereas now you could probably do that in an afternoon. And there was also, you know, I think Amy can probably testify to this, and Mark certainly can as well. How working with analog instruments brings you into closer physicality with what you're doing, and therefore you're sort of naturally exploring, even if you're using quite rudimentary equipment. Whereas when we're working purely with digital software, like working with a laptop, you haven't got the same physicality and the same relationship. So it becomes kind of easier to sort of rest on your laurels, along with the technological advancement that has, you know, made us, you know, lazier in a sense. And you got anything to say about that? And are you guys conscious of that when you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, when you're making electronic music, I mean, it does come a lot more easier than, you know, before you'd have to learn how to play an instrument, which could take, you know, years or something. Now, you know, you can download a cracked version of software and then bang, you're up and running within, like, you know, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's become a lot more accessible to people. Yeah, I mean, you are aware of it, that, you know, it's a lot more easy. It's a more easy come, easy go kind of mentality with it, I guess. Because, I mean, you try and, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of music out there which is like, just maybe people are putting out a lot of stuff now because it's available to everyone, all the you know, computers and software and everything. So you know, everyone's putting out a lot of music. So yeah, I mean, you try and be a bit more conscious of actually being musical in your music, because I think a lot of people just want to make music, or some people make music just for fun, you know, and they put it out there. But the actual musicians who actually think about music, you know, you know where to put the notes, and, you know, like you said, harmonies, what goes together. If you're actually conscious of this, I think it will show in your music, you know.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And it does come out. So I mean, you try and be aware to be, at least put the musical effort in. Whereas, you know, you don't have to, because you can do it easy. But yeah, you definitely try and be more conscious of it. Try and put it in.
And to your point, you know, with the, you know, the analog, I don't know if you guys can see this, with the analog gear, this could be dangerous. Let me get rid of this. A pause for technology with electricity. Okay. There we go. I knew it was going to fall. Okay. So there, on this sort of analog gear, there's touch plates, right, that allow expression. And that was something that the analog, you know, world brought us. And this was originally Don Buchla's Thunder, which were touch plates, and now it's been embraced by the Sensel folks. This is called a morph, and actually you can like take it off and go, okay, now I'm a music production thing, you know, hot swappable. But what's happening, what I'm seeing happening, is the expression that you found in early musical forms by someone like Subotnick, who, you know, I worked with a lot and got, you know, I'm familiar with his music. He was a clarinet player, and I think just the fact that he had that physical relationship with an instrument informed his, you know, his psyche as to what real expression is, you know, actual expression. And his sounds are, you know, insanely gestural, and he'll fly them across the room and surround and things like that. Just, you know, insane. And to have something like this come back with the new MPE, MIDI polyphonic expression, which is simply, you know, if you're playing a cello and you're holding a low note and you're also going, you know, manipulating another string, the low note won't bend with it, so it's polyphonic in its expression. So, and this is just happening now, you know, and this is the sort of thing that makes any sound you create feel real. You know, it doesn't have to be a sound of a violin, cello, clarinet, anything like that. But if it has that timbral change from soft to loud, or you know, that existence in the real physical world where things get brighter and higher the harder you hit it, you know, that kind of thing. So I think it's all just part of this amazing evolution. And now people are kind of going back to it, you know, in a way, but it's hybrid, you know. Now you can control it with this, you know, and this is not analog, you know. This is a highly sophisticated pressure sensing device that did not exist until 2 years ago. So
I see there's kind of a merging of the old style and the new style then, with, you know, technology is still using the old ways, but it's just kind of, we're kind of growing together. You know, I guess maybe at least with electronic music, all the instruments, they kind of went off in one direction, you know, which was, you know, create synthesizers, create modular, create electricity. But now we're kind of going back to how you actually play it as well. Like you said, we're using the MPE controllers and that one. Yeah, it seems to be a good way to do it, more for like live shows and, you know, actually playing in front of a crowd and capturing that moment. I guess even in the studio as well, I guess you could. Yeah,
it's always been a interesting conundrum working with electronics. In the early days, you know, traveling with a Mac 512 with a floppy disk that you put in, and the limitations were, again, greater at that point. And there'd be, you know, I ended up sequencing a lot of things when generally my whole reason for doing this is to perform it live, you know, trying to make it happen just live. And it kind of got a little dumbed down, and I could tell from the audience, they couldn't tell what I was doing as opposed to what the computer was doing, you know? And so I've always sort of struggled with that idea and tried to make sure that there is this real physical relationship to what they're hearing. You know, what you were doing in your show, you know, you were actually giving us, you know, more information and really helping us to hear what you were doing, right? Yeah. By moving, you know, and now there's these sensors that you could shape sound just by, you know, doing this.
Yeah, theremin, that would be quite good to get.
Using the accelerometer on your phone, you know. We're actually working on trying to get that happening with watches now. You put them on dancers and, you know, so. I used to duct tape an iPhone to my my Buto dancer, Michael Sakamoto, and now Sirisuk, and their movements would filter my sound and things like that. And,
wow.
You know, but you know, it was pretty touch and go in terms of connectivity. So sometimes you'd lose the signal and have to go tweak the knobs yourself. So.
Yeah.
You just have to have fun with this stuff, right? I mean,
I thought you were saying the other day, because we started off on analog and then it went digital, and now it's kind of going back to the analog again, because modular's become quite popular in the last few years. And I guess, like, yeah, the amount of sounds that you can make from this has increased as well, especially with all the effect plugins you can use, like modular delays. One company called Intercultural, they do Rainmaker, which is a delay plugin for that, and it changes the sound a lot. You know, it completely changes it. You wouldn't even recognize it from the source material. So I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just fun, you know, just creating sounds and seeing where it goes, and different sounds like evoke different emotions, I guess. So then
people lamenting that we can't make it with this gear, with the analog stuff. We can't always rely on being able to do it again.
Yeah. Every time.
One little tweak of a knob and bam, the whole thing's gone. And you know, the digital thing, you know, it's helping us to preserve what we're doing with the analog. So these hybrid machines, you know, this electron stuff has that brilliant, you know, super rich sound that you lost when we went to, you know, first to computer software. And now it's encased in a digital memory that can bring it back, which is awesome. You know, that's really helpful. But And now also the software, the mathematics behind the software is so much better that sonically it's coming up, to par.
In some of the new BFC, you can hear the sub frequencies in the sawtooth wave, for example, and it really does make a difference. Before it used to be very thin sounding, a lot of the software, but like you said, as it gone on, it's become more and more bigger, more and more richer. The sound, where at the point now it's almost the same as, say, modular or analog. It's maybe not 100%, but there's one plugin called VCV Rec, which is modular based, and it sounds amazing. It sounds almost the same as actual modular itself, so it's just increasing. And as I was saying, it invokes new feelings and emotions when you hear certain sounds, so you can get really into it and you hear all these, especially that's why I like psytrance so much, because there's so many sounds happening all the time. It's just new ideas are coming constantly, and new rhythms and new feelings, and it's just a constantly evolving thing. It's like hyperdrive or something. It's very fast. So it's always coming. It's coming lots, and it's quite attractive to it.
Really refined ear to put those together in a way that'll work. You know what I mean? That's it's not just, I'll just throw a bunch of stuff together. You have to have a certain musical sensibility, and whether or not it's something that you've been taught formally, you have this intuition that not everyone has, right? And that's the beauty, I think, of what you're doing, is bringing that your inner self to the table.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, even being taught as well. I mean, it does definitely help if you do learn some music theory, because you'll be able to apply what you're doing more easily. It's like a tool to use, because you have this tool in front of you. You can have like a very small hammer to hammer a nail. You can have like a proper hammer. And I guess with music theory, when you learn it, it gives you that tool so you can apply yourself more easily and readily to what you're doing. If you're self-taught, maybe it takes a longer process. I mean, but yeah, I guess the end result is the same either way.
Yeah. Thank you. I teach music fundamentals at CalArts, and nobody wants to take it.
Yeah.
You just need to know a few things. You need to be able to.
There was one thing that we talked about the other night, actually, that kind of made me think about this when we were talking about how it went from analog to digital and back to a hybrid now through modular. And so, touching on that, the other night, Amy mentioned about how the impression I got was how each generation listens to things differently, and how she was saying how younger students have a clearer sense of hearing and stuff. And was that more or less what we were touching on the other day, Amy? Was that what you were trying to?
Yeah, I mean, young people's ears are just younger and more able to hear all a greater range of frequencies, certainly than mine, since I've been playing drums and percussion all my life, and really working with electronics way too loudly. That for sure. But one quick story. We were doing Subotnick's Key to Songs, and it had been a Buchla analog synth first, and with the ear unit. So it's like, and there's this big moment, where it goes, and Mort got an endorsement from Yamaha, and he switched the sounds from his piece over to, a one rack synthesizer, and the sound went, and everyone in the group just looked at Mort and was like, "What happened to He's like, "Oh no, it's fine. Just we'll fix it later or something." But it just didn't have it, just and learning it. I would work with him on some sounds on the Malacat. He actually brought this xylophone that's covered with stuff right now. It was like number 4 to his opera hungers, and playing sounds, testing sounds with him, and I go, well, that one feels better. And he's like, no, that's impossible. No, it feels better to play. I don't understand it, but it really does. And the FM gear back then, the engineers were brilliant enough to bring that timbral change with how hard and soft you play something, and that just made it feel like a real instrument. And so eventually that sort of knowledge evolved into the software synthesis that we have, and then becoming this whole combination of things. Yeah, I mean, it's a constant evolution, and more software, the better the software gets, the more computing power you need, to run it.
Yeah.
It's constant climbing up the brick wall.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see where it'll actually end up, even like how different sounds would affect, like people's minds. I mean, you've got like binaural beats at the moment, which, on a certain frequency, that makes you would feel in a certain way, although the science isn't 100% that, but, so, I mean, imagine what could come next, some sort of VR set, maybe we are inside the music somehow or something, I mean, just gonna...
I'm gonna mention. I'm gonna raise one more question, and then I'm gonna hand it over to the audience. And this was about sort of loosely touching on what we were talking about before. So yeah, obviously, like when we get older, our listening naturally deteriorates. So when you're younger, you've got a more attuned ear to hearing. But then obviously, because we're all different ages and we all grew up at different times, and we've all got different prowess with technology, it means that like we would have a different relationship in a sense. So someone that's born in the 21st century won't have the same attachment to, say, 20th century music. Even if they like it, it won't be the same because they didn't develop and grow up with it in a sense. And there's also the fact that, I suppose like when you're developing nowadays and you're living in this hazardous technological world, a lot of bad habits can arise. And one of those is like worsening attention spans and listening spans. And obviously in the past, we don't really know what people's listening skills were like beforehand, like before technology was able to like film and record people, but we get the impression probably it was probably a lot better than it is now. So have you guys got any thoughts on that about how our awareness, I suppose, through technology, that notion of awareness, whether it's through music or through our endeavors, how can we actualize that in a sense?
Do you want to go, Amy?
Go for it.
Sorry for making your heads explode with that. It was just hard to get my thoughts around. But does that make sense? What I was trying to say, in a sense.
So you mean like how we're more aware of music using different mediums?
No, I mean basically for younger people nowadays, they've got way more music in their disposal than older generations did. I mean, exponentially more so. So it means that in a sense, they might be more musically cultured or more musically diverse. But at the same time, because of the fact a lot of music has regressed, and it's a lot, since classical music times, or at least, at least since like I suppose like the 1970s, music has become a lot more simple, popular music. I don't mean like the music you guys make, but the whole verse, chorus, 3-minute pop song thing has taken over. And so the generation since, like I suppose, like anyone, like a millennial generation onwards, I suppose even though they've got a far more wide musical taste, unless they've like had some sort of musical education or are like constantly practicing their craft, they're gonna have like more regressed musical listening skills than maybe like their predecessors did. And so I'm wondering like, how. Yeah,
I think maybe people have like
it's a paradox in a sense.
I guess like when we're younger though, like especially these days and for the past like 30, 40 years, growing up, you've always had like movies and TV shows playing all the time, and they always have a soundtrack to them. Like playing computer games now, even 20 years ago. Soundtrack to them, so you're always around music, and it kind of became like, it's just normal part of life, I guess. It's always around you, compared to say like 100 years ago, where you'd have to go to a specific place to hear music. You can't just hear it at home. I mean, a gramophone or something maybe back then. But you know, you have to go to a certain place. Now it's everywhere. So I guess your ear becomes more finely tuned to it. I guess, like I said, man, with the technology, I guess it's more accessible to people now. So there's going to be a lot more output of music. And I guess, you know, in terms of pop music, it's just going to the lowest common denominator because they want to earn money, I guess. So it's more like that kind of stuff is more like run like a business rather than being art or, as an expression. It's run more businessy, you know, whatever sells the most, just slap that on, just do that. These other, like these smaller genres of music and these, like, you know, the underground music, whatever you want to call it. That's where, you know, more people are doing stuff, and there's more. Yeah, I mean, Naomi was saying the other day, that's where the creativity lies, on the edge, you know, which is, I guess it's always been true. I mean, even the composers back in the day, I guess, I don't know if they were famous when they was alive fully, some of them, and then afterwards they became, you know, more famous.
Famous when you die. Jason, I think you're underestimating younger people.
No, not at all. I'm not underestimating younger people at all, but it is a very different kettle of fish. And like I said, you've got more sounds nowadays, but you've got simpler musical structures. So like, let's think our grandparents' generation, they would have been exposed to, and I suppose it was, you know, the sort of popular music at the time, but then you think things were like more composed through. And then when you look at the research of classical music and how musical structures, you know, affect the brain and stuff. And I know when you've got DJs that are like doing sets, it kind of like brings it onto that similar tangent. But then I'm thinking like, it has brought out the extremes, I guess, in a sense, you know, and obviously because now with technology, we can forge our own paths. There are people that are just generally naturally curious and like exploratory in their nature, and they get onto these like new horizons, musical or otherwise. And then you get people that, well, I suppose it's those tendencies within all of us. Well, obviously with music, it's a certain issue because, well, I mean, popular, even though there's more and more diverse genres coming out, popular culture in a sense is still alive, the popular culture machine, and it is still contaminating a lot of people in a sense. I don't know, I'm not being cynical at all. I don't know. It's almost like, I'm not saying that there's a problem, but do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I do, but I think kind of like talking about Trump, you know, if you don't talk about maybe he'll go away eventually. But I'm just sort of reminded of, you know, the last bunch of years when I've been, you know, working with students and I'll say something and they'll go, "Oh, did you hear this? This is like," and they'll turn me on to the, you know, craziest shit I've never heard before. And it's really, really amazing. So there's these connections between people going on, you know, under the surface too, you know, that, you know, that bring out, you know, like just the whole diversity of the thing, you know, from Flying Lotus, Thundercat, Juana Molina to like Autiker or Animal Collective, which gave birth to like Panda Bear, and you know, those things I think are what we need to focus on, you know, and they're all completely different, you know, and the newer electronic scenes, you know, all the genres are constantly evolving. I mean, how many genres did you just name earlier, Mark? You know, this is like, you know, I can't keep track of it, but you know, the younger people are just like hungry for more and for change, you know. So I think you're right, Jason, and I think that, you know, all of us need to just keep pumping out new forms and just, you know, making people go, what happened? You know, I hear a groove, but one of the tracks is in 15 when the other's in 16. So I don't know where the hell one is, you know? And I kind of don't really care because there's, you know, I can still groove to that, you know? Right. So I'll shut up.
I'm in jazz now. Jazz. Eventually just acid jazz is taken over. Yeah, I mean, I guess even with like, yeah, I could say about like psytrance, you know, because it does have that 4x4 structure. What I'm trying to do now, and I get like a few other friends are, is trying to break it. So it's like 5/4 or like, you know, 7/8 or something like this, just so it goes out of time and it's something a bit different. And I mean, if you're on a dance floor, I mean, you've still got that beat there, which keeps you dancing, but it's also, like you were saying, Amy, everything's changing all the time. Like, when's a crash going to come? When's the next drop? It's just like, you know, it keeps you guessing, which makes it, yeah, interesting. I would say what I've noticed, especially in ambient music, which I quite like as well, they've kind of mixed everything together now, especially the ambient that's been coming out the past couple of years. I've noticed that the production's increased, so it does sound a lot more like warmer and richer, but they're also mixing loads of different ideas together from like, you know, bands and like electronic stuff and sounds of nature, and they are really mixing it all together. And it is very interesting to see actually how it is evolving like this. It seems like everyone's kind of throwing it all into the mixer. Whatever they know is just being thrown into the mixer, being ground up, and then something new is emerging. In the past couple of years, I would say, and hopefully, yeah, for the next few as well. Yeah, which is quite interesting. Evolution of music, just mix it all together.
Yeah, and that whole polyrhythmic sense, you know. I mean, I was just working with a student on this, but okay, this is kind of looks like Frank Zappa's Black Page there, but really, I don't know if it's backwards, but the bass comes in 33/16, and then the keyboard comes in 8/4, which is really the 32/16. And it takes 60 times of everyone playing their pattern for it all to come back at one. But the melodies are, you know, really catchy. And we as humans had to do that and not listen to each other until we actually did it 60 times and came together. But with this stuff, you know, you can put that on it. You know, you can put these complex forms on there. But if you have your, you know, that kind of thing going, people are gonna go with you. You know, they're gonna believe. You know, if you keep it kind of pulled together. You know.
Yeah, the kick drum keeps you grounded.
Yeah.
Keeps you grounded at least. Yeah, it's interesting.
But and what about one last thing, like 7/2, right? Or it comes back around after so many times.
Yeah.
Bam! There you are. You know, so you could throw that against it and like, boom. You know what's happening, but it's still totally grooved, right? So it's mathematics, which I was really bad at. But
I guess people are just looking out for that, like just experimenting in some ways, you know, something a bit different, because I guess the formulas have been done so many times. It's time to do something new that you've never, like any idea that you have, just throw it in there and just see what happens, you know, with the time signatures and crazy sounds and just their structure in general. Just, I think it's a time to just create new structures, really.
And you're writing it, so there's no wrong. There is no wrong there.
Yeah. They say when you paint a picture, look at art like painting a picture. Like nobody can paint a picture wrong, you know?
Right?
So,
yeah, exactly. It's yours. I wanted
it. Nice. We do questions?
I think it's time to like ask the audiences now. So if anyone's like willing to ask anything to Mark or Amy or myself, please go ahead, and if anything needs further clarification, or if you guys have got anything that you'd like to bring into the topic, feel free to unmute your microphones.
Do not be shy.
Hello, wherever you are.
Hi, this is Jody Diamond. I'm in New York.
Oh, hello, Jody.
Hi. Yeah, I went to Cal Arts when it started in 1970.
Yeah.
So I'm an old Cal Arts person. what I'm wondering, because you're talking about having these new instruments, and I've been thinking a lot lately about the relationship we have with our instruments. I just did a collection of pieces called Alones from Frog Peak composers, because I think we're all home alone with our instrument. So it's this big collection. So I'm wondering what kind of, because this was about consciousness, what kind of relationship you develop with these newer instruments. And I know some instruments, you play them and you just feel like you become one with them. And it's like they're playing you and you're playing it. You kind of lose that boundary. How does that work with newer instruments or electronic instruments? When you're playing, does the instrument become part of who you are?
I could say, yeah, for electronic instruments, I guess, yeah, maybe it's a different way of looking at it, I guess, because, as you're making the track, usually you listen to the same loop over and over again, and you're kind of like changing sounds. You maybe record some like squelchy sounds, like, and then you're cutting that up and then placing it in the track. So, it is a different way of working with music, I guess, because it's not really physical. It's more, it's more like a slow process. It's just coming out of you making the sound, arranging it, moving on. I would say it's a different relationship to a traditional instrument for sure. We can make sounds now, just record for like hours, and then, like I said, chop it up, place it in the track. I guess it is a different way of making music. I think it's more of, at least I can say for me, and I guess people that are into the genre I'm into, it's more about the texture of the sound and the feeling of it, rather than the actual notes. It's just more about just the actual sound.
We're training our.
You obviously have. Go ahead.
I was just saying we're training our instruments, in an interesting, and learning what they have to offer, but also kind of shaping them to be what we need them to be.
Yeah.
So it's like it's like being an instrument builder, but the parts that you're building with is sound, and your perception of certain sounds and how you react to them. It's like that becomes like the parts of the instrument that you're constructing. Sounds like. Yeah,
it's like a whole world, I guess. It's kind of like, your relationship to certain sounds, what you like in particular, like an atmosphere, like, very ethereal one you can put in there, offset it with like a deep, like drum sound, like. So, it's more like, just balance between the sounds rather than, playing notes or coming up with a melody. It's just, textures and, sounds themselves, I guess.
Right. But in the end, we still are using the same set of perceptual tools that we use to make any kind of music. The experience in the moment of hearing the sound and making creative decisions about it. That doesn't really change. The things in your hand might change, right? But that experience of saying, "Oh yeah, I like that sound," or that fits. Does that stay the same? Does that stay the same?
I guess it comes down to personal preference, what you like, whatever is your thing. Some people like their music to be very bright, other people like it to be a bit more darker. So it depends, like whatever you like with your music. It's just just how you I guess using intuition, like we were saying earlier, it's whatever you feel like, whatever you like, and you put it into your music. So I guess with electronic is a lot more of a slower process than, say, like picking up a guitar and strumming out, some chords. It's a lot more just understand it.
Can I ask one more question? Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
I play gamelan, so there's a limit in a sense to what I can do. Electronic music terrifies me, because I think of it as having no constrictions to start with. So it's like, how do you know what you're working with? I find the idea of, even though I've been around it all my life, it seems really overwhelming. So how do you approach something like that when you can make like any sound and any rhythm and any timbre, and there's You're not starting with some like a fixed set. It's like, okay, what can I do with this? You're starting with like endless possibilities. I wouldn't even know where to begin. It really scares me.
Yeah.
How do you even start to think about it?
I guess you would do it from, instead of looking at it from the top down in terms of like this, it's unlimited, you can do anything you want. What I try and do is try and start from the bottom up. So say that, okay, here's a synthesizer, I'm going to turn it on. I wouldn't have any preconceived ideas in my head of what it is or what it can do. I'm just going to start jamming with it and making a sound and just take it from there, you know, see what different parts of the synthesizer does what, and just slowly build whatever I like an organic kind of thing, rather than trying to see ahead of time and seeing, you know, because then you'll get disconnected from it. It's like, it's too mental out there. There's too many, like a tree, you know, going out. If you're looking at the branches at the top, it's going to be very hard to do anything, you know, in anything in life, I guess. So if you start from the bottom, so you start to build slowly all the sounds, and you can make like a preset bank, and yeah, just go from there. Dude. Like just like slowly evolve it.
That's very helpful. It kind of reminds me of, you know, you want to make some really complicated dish. You don't start by looking at like every single possible. You have to start one ingredient at a time, right? Yeah. I like that you're saying that. You start with one thing. It's like, yeah, that tastes good, that feels good, and then you choose the next thing. So it's all connected. It's not like just this waterfall of possibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for that. That helps me.
You're welcome. Cheers.
Add melody to taste.
Yeah.
Your face al dente. And
thanks a lot, Jodie. Anyone else got any questions? I think Dan looks like he's asked something. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a couple I've got here, but I was thinking about like the like Neuralink, if you can make music with your mind eventually or whatever, will the worth of music, not like worth as in money, but, you know, like the sort of like worth that people perceive music to have, will that, like, do you think that would change at all? Because, you know, you could just bash out a song really quickly. It would be, it'd be interesting, because I guess, you know, some people aren't musical at all, so you'd link them up and it would just sound atrocious. But you know, so many people would be able to just make music straight away. I don't know. The fact there's like not so much effort involved as well. You know, you're not like changing parameters on a a synth or whatever. You're just like thinking it. I wonder if like how sort of the response to listening to that music created by people in that way, if that would like change at all.
Jason?
Oh, I was really hoping that Mark would answer that one again. Jesus.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how it would change. I guess it would. It depends what would come out of it, really. I guess at first would be really random sounds. So I mean, it wouldn't be like worth much. I guess as time goes on, there'll be like a whole structure created around it. So it's like it's like a whole scene, you know, like the Neuralink scene that people are making out of their heads. There's like a whole like thing built up around it. Man, yeah, it's hard to say what will come out. I mean, maybe it would be worth less, but then it could be the evolution. I guess people.
Yeah, it could make things sound like even like, you know, completely even more like wide in terms of different sounds and different ways people can do sounds, and it could very well be like that.
Yeah, I guess when synths first come around in like the 70s, some people that played rock and roll like, oh, this is crap, this will never take on. And all number one of this massive scene at the moment.
I think like when synths sort of started, didn't people like just see them as like esoteric things that were, you know, just kind of used for soundscapes and not like musical at all? It's just like, it's just somebody noodling about, you know.
I mean, even today, people still find electronic music quite inhuman. I mean, luckily, not too many people nowadays, but there's still like that whole backlash with many people, like young people, old people, doesn't really matter, that are somewhat against that. But yeah, with these brainwave things, does it just translate the brainwaves into sounds, or I mean, that's basically all we can, as far as we can go, isn't it? Like with Alvin Lucier as well, isn't there? His,
there might be some basic sounds like tones, like sine waves.
Hang on, I'll find it quickly.
Elon Musk is doing it.
I think it's been going on and it's still going on.
I mean, to actually recreate what's going on in someone's head and like translate that acoustically. I mean, apart from like composers and producers and musicians realizing stuff, I mean, it will be interesting to see whether or not they could actually develop technology that could actually just immediately translate what's in our subconscious. That would be quite astonishing. But I think the chances of us getting there will be the chances of us being able to like record our dreams. I mean, do you reckon that's going to be possible ever?
Not sure I'd want
that. There's a guy called Onyx. I can't remember his surname, but he plays around with his. It's like a glove that he wears, and he's kind of moving his hands. He's kind of like it's creating this like crunchy sound. I mean, I know Amy was talking about that same stuff before. I guess it would be like that, but like maybe more like a different variety of sounds. If they're using brain waves and stuff, maybe you can create different tones with that. You know, I mean, it would be unlimited, I guess, by the end.
It is fundamentally limitless, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as we evolve, this music's going to evolve. Everything will evolve. Technology, our interaction with the music would completely change. You know, like I said, with VR sets, maybe we might be actually inside the music. You know, I don't know. Maybe we'll be in there and we can see around and see the notes and press the notes and see the sound box and press it and different sounds would come out. I mean, yeah. Maybe even stuff we couldn't even conceptualize at the moment could come up,
Yeah, we've been doing that kind of thing for a long time already with video, live video, and you kind of, you can trigger things in, the program Isadora by Mark Caniglio or Jitter, stuff like that, where you just move in space and. Yeah, it's basically a grid looking at you, and you're crossing through a grid, and you can set up, variables. Did you move past this, out of this, or did you move into this, and trigger things just by, doing some before, bring the airplane down. Okay.
Are they still working on this?
Oh yeah, that's been around for a long time. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's like in the early stages. So eventually they will come up with actual songs, or tracks or something by, maybe 10 years, 20 years or something.
Yeah, it's harder to construct it, I think, to, a song, like a song form, but actually maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, like going back to Dan's question, I guess, if it would be worth anything, I guess it depends like on the output of it. If it is actually, better than the music that we can create on our computers now, if it's actually better than that, then I think, yeah, for sure, it'd be like a massive market. Whoever's got the most musical brain would be massive.
It'll probably be someone we never expect. It'll probably be someone that has nothing to do with music and doesn't have any interest in music. And we suddenly find out he's like Bach 2.0 or something. That'd be nuts. Yeah.
Dude, he's got.
There was a guy who got struck by lightning, and he wasn't even interested in music. He was completely like amusical, had no interest in it, and he got struck by lightning and was in hospital for a few weeks, whatever. When he came out, he just had this urge to play the piano, and as soon as he got on it, he was able to play everything, like, and creating his own stuff, playing like Beethoven and stuff, like absolutely nuts.
Must be like an access point in the brain, no? That kind of goes to these spaces that you can, with your muses, and it's like you have ultimate access to that point, in terms of like your brain.
I know some composers. I won't say their names, but they keep an apartment in Las Vegas because they have the ability to count cards and things like that. So they have that musical brain, and they switch it over to actually win at blackjack. I mean, there's all sorts of uses for the musical.
Good to use it to make money, because in music there's not so much money, so you have to do other stuff.
They're both actually pretty successful. I think it's sort of just been a joke for them too. Beat the machine. Yeah.
Okay. We haven't got a lot more time for a lot of questions, but Monica wrote a question in the chat that's very compelling that I'm going to read out to you guys and see if you've got any answers to this, because it's a very valid point. She said, in your perspective of practitioners with the freedom and privilege of advanced technology nowadays, in the context of identity and unique character of the musician or even visual artist nowadays, do these freedoms of advanced technology fail or succeed in making us find our true identity and character, or our true soul to some extent, in the context of understanding who is our true self? Are we now confined by freedom, or does limitation truly help us discover our true character, identity, or even find out our true core? It's a good point. I mean, obviously it goes to the whole notion of like the fact that the logic and intuition mutually correspond, and that we can't eliminate what it is to be human, fundamentally speaking, but at the same time we still have to rely on things that are beyond our control, like mathematics. Mathematics would exist without us, just our interpretation of it makes it exist for us in a sense. So have you guys got any thing you'd like to talk about that?
It's the other day when we were talking, we were finishing up, and we're like, okay, I got to go down into the studio and start working. I kind of wish I didn't have to sleep or eat sometimes, yeah. And so I think it's really, for me, it's freedom, until the electricity goes out, and then time to go for a walk.
2021, that'll be the COVID of this year, with the grid going down, no electricity, people eating each other.
Purging.
Yeah, Mark, what are your thoughts on Monica's question? Have you got any?
I think as technology has increased, we have access to more plugins and more, equipment. You can kind of get lost in that. Maybe I was saying that earlier, that you can get lost and you just use the presets and just play around, and you can make a track easy, just in like you said, one afternoon or something. If you take the time to learn what you're using, is maybe you can be a bit more. It allows you to express yourself a bit more rather than just using loads of plugins just randomly. If you stick to maybe one synth or one, piece of equipment that you use, then maybe you can express yourself a bit more inside of it, rather than, like I said, if you have loads of equipment, you can it can be very surface level, But now, I mean, if you know a lot of equipment, then that's amazing as well, that's great. But yeah, with the plugins, because they're so cheap nowadays, and like I said, you can get cracked software quite easily. So if it doesn't force you to actually get involved as much, I think, than if you actually pay money for it, then it's like you kind of own it, it's yours, and you actually take care of it, and you nurture it, and it grows into a new thing. Yeah, I think as long as you learn your tools, just you don't have to have all the equipment, but just one or two pieces is maybe enough. Depends what you're doing, but just a few pieces. It could give you more freedom, putting a limit on yourself. If you put some limitations on your creativity, then it does force you to find new avenues in what way to go. I think I answered the question. I don't know.
There's a lot of people that are now going away from the computer at all, just using analog gear, their gear, and no computer. There's people that are practicing, what would it be? Kind of, what's the word? When you give up something, You know, they're
Sacrifice.
Say it again.
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. Yeah, you know, they're sacrificing, or you know, almost like something you do for Lent. You know. Okay, so I'm going to put these restrictions on myself, and it becomes more contemplative, and what comes out, you know, can be more introspective, I suppose. You know, so yeah, it's good to put limits on yourself, but it's also good to just turn on the machines, close your eyes and spin the dial, you know, and see what happens. And if it sparks something, you know, what's wrong with it? You know, I mean, yeah, you know, John Cage is my God, you know, and chance and mistakes and all that stuff are, you know, where are they coming from? You know, who's to say they're chance or mistakes?
Yeah. Would you find it hard to base your whole idea of music on that? So like, I guess some people would make music and they just do random stuff all the time and they just record and chop it up. Or would you think maybe you could go from, you know, jamming with like say one synth, and then, you know, just one day all of a sudden you just think, okay, I'm just going to turn that button randomly to see what that does, and then you'll create new sounds. Do you think that making music in like in a random way could be quite good overall, or do you think you have to maybe don't randomize it so much, if that makes sense?
I just don't like, I really don't like rules, you know what I mean? So I think everything is good, and anything that gets you to a point where you feel, you know, you've created something, it's all good. I mean, I use techniques, you know, sometimes I don't, you know, and I'm sure, you know, just shit happens, right? The first piece I ever wrote was a mistake. You know, I was laying out samples on the Malacat, and it got set to the wrong channel on the synthesizer, and instead of triggering samples, it triggered pitches. And it was like, oh, I like that melody. You know, it's just this like weird, simple little thing that I wouldn't have. I'm not so attached to melodies; they don't really come to me. You know, and to this day, I mean, a lot of people say it's one of the best things I've done. It was just a total mistake, you know. So there you have it.
Nice.
I'm a mistake in action.
Yeah, it's just those happy accidents, you know, in the studio. Sometimes even, I mean, on Cubase 5, which is the older version I used, the time stretching was really bad inside. So if you stretch the sample out, it would stretch it, but it would also skip as well throughout the sample. So you could create some interesting, like, you know, sounds with this, and then as long as you record what you're doing, just bounce it down to audio, and then you can chop it up and change it, you know. And so yeah, these happy accidents are good. You know, when they do happen, it's like, oh, I didn't expect that. That's nice. Put it in the track. Nice one. Keep going on to other stuff. Yeah, like you said, maybe it's a combination of both. You know, just doing what you want to do and have your preconceived idea, relatively, kind of, and then just seeing how it goes and seeing what comes out at the end. I mean, yeah, it's quite a good way of doing it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm actually building on this this question that Monica asked that you guys are still talking about. Actually, I wanted to like sort of pitch in a little bit, because actually her and Jodie are discussing on the chat now about limits, and Jodie was saying that this can be like, you know, a purely human thing where we can actually naturally set the limits, and Monica replied saying that like the problem is with people in our generation, the advances of technology has meant that a lot of things are perceivably the same for us. And then that sort of brings into account for me like something that sort of brings these notions into account regarding like how those limits can be set in the first place. And obviously we can do that in a somewhat preconceived manner, or we can have like a format that we can build upon. And so when we also look back at electronic music, we know that a lot of the electronic music artists were not necessarily, the pioneers. They weren't necessarily inspired by popular artists that were in tune with nowadays. They would have gone back further. They would have been inspired either by classical musicians or by different world music around the world. And so nowadays, when you're thinking about younger generations, they're now sort of like taking second or third rate information in a sense. So whereas electronic pioneers in the 1950s would have been listening to, say, like classical music or whatever, then the Beatles and Miles Davis and Frank Zappa, that generation were into Stockhausen. And then you get the next generation is into the Beatles and Frank Zappa. And then you get the next generation, which is into that previous generation, and so on. And so it means that people are losing touch with what initially, well, their sort of roots in a sense. And obviously, as we evolve, the only way that we can evolve congruently is by being in touch with our heritage and by being in touch with who we fundamentally are. And that accounts not necessarily for our cultures and for our heritage in that sense, but also in a sense of our, in the sense of the arts as well. So, is there anything you guys might be able to touch on that before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say it's very important to know the history of music for sure, to see where it all come from and see your influences, if that makes sense. Whoever influenced you, to see who influenced them. So you got to keep going back and back throughout time, and then, it's very important just to know where it all came from, and even to remix some of the ideas from back then in the new stuff that you're making now. I think is very important to do. So it's like one big ball of evolution. Music, it just keeps growing and growing. Yeah. I think if you don't learn that, then you can still create obviously amazing stuff, which I'm sure a lot of people have. Basically, it's important to have the fundamentals, I would say. Yeah. Know about them.
Yeah, and the work that I've heard Monica do doesn't sound the same at all to me. Monica, you're groundbreaking. Just kind of turning into I remember this sort of vocal shaman on stage. During some of the more Persian music sections of the work we did together. Well, does it have to be an instrument, Monica? Your voice is your instrument, and you're lucky. It's like so totally connected to your being. You don't need much. Like you had before.
Guys, I think we're going to have to wrap this up, unless anyone's really bursting at the seams to ask something, in which they're more than welcome to rudely unmute their microphones and just blare everything out at me. So firstly, I'd like to thank Mark and Amy for joining me in this talk. You guys are awesome and have provided so much insight for me and hopefully everyone else as well. And obviously, thanks to the lovely audience for coming. It's been amazing to have all of you here. Also thanks to my sister at Sacred Bridge, TS, for helping organize this talk and putting everything together on Zoom. You're awesome as well. And just wanted to touch base before we go about the remainder of the Sacred Rhythm Festival that will be continuing for the remainder of this week. We have 2 performances tomorrow, which is the second of 2 concerts of back-to-back Indian and Indonesian music. So that's one thing to look forward to tomorrow at 1 p.m. UTC. And then on Friday, Gado Gado Ensemble are also going to be performing at another festival, online festival, which is, I had it on here actually, just give me 1 second before I completely forget. It's the BMB festival that was originally organised by the Indonesian maestro and pioneer I Wayan Sadra. That's amazing news to have heard that this week. It's on the 30th and the 31st, whereby you will be able to see Amy and Mark show off their prowess on the final Sunday. Cannot afford to miss that. It's going to be some brilliant music where you'll be able to then hear them in action and hear these brilliant minds at work. And also there's going to be some other great music that you can't really afford to miss either, and 2 more webinars as well. And well, I'm just going to say that like this talk and every other event, this festival has been, everyone's made it. The audience, the people that have taken part, the people that have helped organize it, it's almost like a dream come true in these adverse times that so many people can come together and feel closer together and would have actually been able to connect, who wouldn't have been able to meet necessarily in person given the constraints of travel prior to the coronavirus anyway, which is, being everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Amy and Mark.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Love you guys.
Love you all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was really great. Thank you very, very much. Glad I could be here. Terrific.
Well done, Jason. Well done, JC.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you all the rest of this week.
Yep. We'll be there.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.